Edge Associate Broker with Keller Williams Realty, and I want to talk to you today about how to buy property, whether it's a house, a residential property, or a commercial property. It kind of all works the same processes. Just a little tweaks are different for residential and commercial, but I help with both. Looking to buy property for a first-time home, say you're looking for an investment property, a second home, vacation home, or a commercial business. You want to franchise your business or put your business in multiple locations, things like that. I'm here to help. So I want to give you a little bit of a rundown on what that process may look like to give you some idea of what to expect and hopefully answer some questions. I've had many questions along the way, so I wanted to add these in here in hopes that it could help you get started to buy your next property. First thing is you decide that you want to buy property. So you call real estate agent and you want to get the process going. And one thing that I wanted to point out is, do you need a buyer agent? And what does a buyer agent mean? So a buyer agent is someone that helps buyers. And the way they do that is they're representing the buyer. The person that lists the home, the agent that lists the home or property, they are helping the sellers. So it is to the advantage of the buyer to have their own representation as a buyer and to help them through that whole process. As a buyer agent myself, maybe all buyer agents don't do it the same way, but for me, I will be there to help educate, advise, negotiate on your behalf, be there for inspections, be there at closing, be there to answer your questions, and also make sure everybody's on track with, once we go under contract, make sure the attorney, lender, everybody's doing what they're supposed to do to meet that closing date. And protect that contract as well. So those are some things. Another question that comes up is having a buyer agent. Is that free or is that no cost to the buyer? So at no point do agents work for free. So they're always they have to get paid, but they get paid most of the time. The seller listing a property will opt to pay a buyer agent to get that house closed or that property closed. And that's not always the case. So it's best to consult with a buyer agent. They most of the time will have a buyer agent contract, which I do, which explains and outlines every part of the buying process, what to expect from me, what I might expect from the buyers. So you can't look at it as free. We are getting paid from someone somehow. And sometimes that seller may say, we're not going to pay a buyer agent anything. So who's going to pay the buyer agent to represent them? That would come from the buyer if that was the case. So we would discuss that further on what that looks like. But that's something to be aware of. We're not free agents. We do get paid at most of the time at closing. So all that time of, showing properties and doing all that work ahead of time, none of that is being paid for until the house closes or the property closes. So that's just one tip there. The other thing is, can an agent represent both the buyer and seller? So we are in Delaware, and in Delaware, we're known as a dual agent state. And we have a form that we give to everybody we come in contact with looking to buy property. And it's called a Consumer Information Statement. And that's something directly from the state of Delaware that explains how real estate works in Delaware. And part of that is explaining some of the dual agent status. So yes, in Delaware, a real estate agent can help both buyer and seller as long as everybody's in agreement with that. And they can also help everybody. You understand a little bit about buyer agency. The next step in the buying process is to talk with a lender unless you're paying cash, which you can do. But if you need to get a loan from a mortgage company or a commercial loan, you need to talk to that lender. And I do have some great contacts to put you in contact with to get a pre-approval. Now, on the residential side of real estate, that's a pretty normal thing. Most lenders take less than 24 hours to turn around that pre-approval. They're going to check some things, make sure that you're good to go, give you a estimate on payment, things like that, so that you understand how much you're qualified for and what you're comfortable with, and that way you can go shopping at that point. Commercial's a little bit different. They don't necessarily do a pre-approval. They're going to look at many things, assets, what kind of business experience. There's going to be a lot of different questions related around that commercial property use, but you still want to talk to a commercial lender to find out what's needed, what's the process, and if it's doable for you. It could take a little bit longer. So after that, you're going to talk to a lender. Let's say you get a pre-approval or your status is looking good to go ahead and buy. So after you talk to your lender, you kind of know what your payments might look like, what your down payment's going to be, how much that is looking like, and what your closing costs might be. And you're kind of getting an idea for how much the purchase is really going to cost you to get going with shopping. For residential properties, there's a bunch of different types of loans. There's FHA and USDA and a VA loan. Most of the time, the lenders I deal with can handle all those types of loans. There's even some programs to help with closing costs on primary residential homes. So there's lots of things to discuss with a lender on that piece. But you want to know what loan's going to be best for you, what do you qualify for, and then also on some of those loans, so for an FHA or USDA or even a VA loan, there's going to be certain restrictions on the home you can buy. Restrictions meaning it can't need a lot of work or have a lot of safety issues. The appraiser that comes out is going to appraise the home based on what kind of loan it is and make sure that it passes certain things, that it doesn't have, for example, chipping paint is one thing that might not go for that type of loan, and other things that come up. They just want to make sure the house is livable, safe, and not going to have any issues. So those things are things that we look at too. So it's important to know what kind of loan you're going to target, and that way we know we can't necessarily get a home that needs major rehab for an FHA type loan. All those things kind of get worked out ahead of time. Another thing to bring up is manufactured homes. Here in Delaware, we do have quite a bit of manufactured home communities. We have them at the beach. We have them all throughout the state. So certain lenders will not loan on those manufactured homes if they're in lease land. So if there's lot rent, things like that, then you're not going to get a typical FHA loan for the 3.5% down. You might have to look at a different type of loan. Typically, the manufactured home loans on lease land, they do require more of a down payment, 10, maybe 15%. A lot of times the terms are shorter, so the payment might be higher, but you're paying it off sooner. So all those things come up. So when you see like a manufactured home in a lease land community, the terms are going to be different for the loan. Also, single wide manufactured homes, some lenders may not loan on them if it's on its own property. Double wides, there's a lot of different little rules for the age. And then there's something called a Class C home. Class C home is a home, it's a double wide, but it has a permanent foundation. And it's been deemed and it's been classified that it's not movable anymore. So it's a permanent situation, and the title that comes with a double wide is much like a car, and it is retired now from the DMV and converted basically to real property. So there's some things that they can loan on the Class C manufactured homes. I have seen rates be a little bit different on them at times. But mainly, it can't be too old either. I believe most lenders that I've talked to say it can't be older than built in 1976 or older than that. But you always want to check to make sure that some rule hasn't changed, or that their timeline is different. So if you're gearing towards a house like that, we always double check with the lender to make sure that this is something that's going to be able to be financed. All right. So a little bit on manufactured homes. Then we talk about fees to purchase a home. So how much does it cost? What is closing cost? A lot of people want to know, what is closing cost? What's it all about? So in Delaware, we have a 4% transfer tax. That means anytime a property is transferred, the state of Delaware is going to take 4% of that property purchase price. And usually that's split 2 and 2 with the buyer and seller. So that 2% of the purchase price of transfer tax is going to be paid at closing. That's part of closing costs. That's most of the time the biggest part of it. First-time home buyers can sometimes see a discount on that transfer tax if there is a statewide discount, but there's also certain towns, if you're buying in town, some towns participate in that transfer tax discount as well. And so it's just a matter of knowing if the town you're buying in participates or not. And if that discount comes along, then that can help lower your closing cost. But with that, you have that closing cost, then there's the attorney fees. So the attorney is going to charge to take care of transferring everything from seller to buyer, and they're going to do a title search, and they're going to make sure there's clear title being delivered to you. So they're going to take care of all that. They're also going to get a title policy started for you. So there's a cost for that. And then if you are getting a loan, there are lender costs. So there's cost for the lender to do the loan. There is a cost to startup costs for escrow, meaning for your homeowner's insurance. If it's in a flood zone, that's another insurance. So there's all these little things. And we usually say to estimate for residential closing costs between 4 and 5% of the purchase price. The lender can also give you an estimate. At closing, you will get an itemized list of all the closing costs, and the attorney will go over that. And you'll have, if there's something different or something, wrong, they'll fix it. But you'll get that itemized list of where exactly all the funds are going for closing. Okay, so then things that are paid before closing would be if the buyer wants to get a home inspection, that's paid for before closing. If a buyer wants to get any other kind of inspections, like their own septic inspection or termites, or inspection for radon, test the well water. If it's a public sewer system, maybe they want to have a sewer company come in and check and make sure all the pipes are clear and there's no roots bothering the piping and things like that. So there's a lot of inspections you can get for a home during the due diligence period before closing, and those would all be out of pocket for the buyer. The other thing out of pocket for the buyer most of the time is the appraisal. So the bank is going to do an appraisal. Buyers can do their own home inspections. Those costs usually come out of pocket up front before closing. They are non-refundable. So if for some reason if the house doesn't close, you have spent that money that doesn't come back. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is there is an escrow deposit or earnest money deposit that gets put on the contract and comes back to you at closing. Or if you are a buyer that defaults on the contract outside of the contract terms, then you may not get that deposit back. It may go to the seller because the seller essentially took the house off the market in hopes that you were going to buy it. Money deposits can be anything. So it depends on the deal. It depends on if there's multiple offers. There's a lot of factors. And that's where your agent comes in to decide what might be the best deposit to put on this. So that's more to come on that talk. So that talks a little bit about fees. So the next step is house hunting. So what do you need to know about that? So first of all, I'm going to set you up on auto emails from the MLS, directly from the MLS, based on your locations that you want or certain criteria you want. Maybe you have to have a garage. Maybe you have to have a basement. All those things we can plug in and you will get those listings. What I tell people is that when you see a listing that you absolutely love, you need to call or text me so we can dig in a little further and set up the appointment to go see it. So maybe you see a house you absolutely love and you want to try to get in that day, next day, we can do that. Or maybe you set up, you're just like, I want to see all 10 of these on Saturday. We can set that up as well. So I'm part of that, which helps you schedule, arrange things. So you send me what you like, we'll get them scheduled. The other thing is touring open houses. So yes, you've hired me to be your buyer agent, but you can go tour any open houses you see. The only thing you need to do is talk with the person hosting the open house. Is most of the time the listing agent. You just let them know that you already have an agent and that you're just looking. And most of the time, if you like the house at the open house, I will also schedule a second showing so that we can all see it together. But feel free to go to any open house you want. Just let them know you're already working with an agent. And then the other thing is driving by. So say you see a sign out on a house that you like, and you're like, hey, I see the real estate sign out there. There's the phone number. Call me though. I'm your buyer agent, so I will find out all the information you want to know about that house. Just let me know where you're at. If you have an address, that's great. Text me. Other than that, I can get all the information to you, disclosures, things like that. We'll dig in, we'll get the price, and if you like it, then we'll schedule an appointment. So driving by, seeing signs, that's fine. Just text me, let me know that you're interested, and we'll go from there. On new construction, you can have a buyer agent help you. We go to the construction appointments with you. A lot of times help through the process, make sure the contract you're signing with them looks okay, seeing if there's anything we need to add to help protect you. And then there's also some inspections you can get. And most of the time for home inspections on new construction, they go through phases so that if something's not right, they can correct it then. And I will attend those as well. Now, one thing that's good for remote buyers is what I've done in the past is help a buyer purchase a new construction home. However, they're in a different state, and then I'm able to do a FaceTime live or video walkthrough of each inspection process and check on the process here while they can't be here. So there's all kinds of things that we can do in that sense. Where you've gotten your pre-approval, you're shopping for homes. One thing I want you to know is that your lender will go over with you things to do and don't do to protect your pre-approval, meaning don't open new lines of credit, don't move large sums of money around, don't buy a new car, all those things that could affect your debt and income. Don't change jobs. If you're going to plan on doing something, talk to the lender first and make sure it's not going to negatively affect your pre-approval. Then go from there. And make sure you pay your bills on time. So don't start paying bills late or getting negative, derogatory things on your credit because you didn't pay your bills on time. All those things, they recheck credit, they recheck income before closing. So just make sure everything is still staying the same as it was when you had your pre-approval. All right, so next you're saying you found the one. You love a house, you fall in love with it, or a commercial property for your business, and you're like, this is the one, we want to put in an offer. So great. I'm going to help make sure you understand the contract, negotiate everything for you, and get that offer accepted. So once that happens, we have a small window of time to get through inspections, appraisal, get all the lender stuff squared away, the title search come back in from the attorney, a survey if you want it. Most of the time that all happens within 30 days, and we will close, and that you will get the keys in about 30 days. Sometimes if you have cash, it can be quicker, but most of the time if you're getting a loan, 30 days. Now commercial property is going to take longer. It takes longer for the bank to get everything together for commercial property. A lot of times it depends on, what you're buying. There could be more intensive inspection type studies done, environmental studies sometimes that the bank is going to require. So there might be some requirements there that are going to take longer for a commercial property depending on what it is. But for residential, we're going to go through the contract. I do have a form that kind of gives you an update, gives you a heads up on what kind of questions I'm going to ask you to fill in that contract. A couple things are how much our escrow deposit's going to be, what inspections you're going to want. So you're going to need to know that when we put in the contract, when the due dates for the inspection is going to come back, and anything else that's important to you that you want for the property. So we're going to add all those things in. Another thing I want to say about researching the location. So location is going to be very important, and it's really on the buyer to make sure that location is going to be good for the buyer. So they want to research crime, things like that about the neighborhood. You want to make sure you do that and do all the checking you want to do on what's important for you, and make sure that the property you want to buy is in a location that is going to be good for you. So also the buyer is going to pick the closing date. So the buyer picks the closing date. So you want to make sure you're not going on vacation, it's not a birthday party, things like that, because we do want to try to stick to that closing date. A lot of times it is easy to move that closing date up, but not out. And sometimes you can upset a seller from having to do that. Then they start asking a lot of questions. Why are we moving the date? So you just want to check a calendar, make sure it's not a special day, and we're going to pick a date and put that on the contract, and that's the goal. So everybody's going to stick to that date. We also have to keep track of time. We have to make sure the appraisal's done in time. The lender is getting their stuff done in time. The attorney's getting title work back in time. That's all things that I'm going to do to reach out to all of them, which takes a lot of times multiple calls and emails, making sure we're getting everything done in time. Okay. And then also, once the offer is accepted, contract, I'll send the contract to the lender, send it to the attorney that you pick. You pick the attorney, and underwriting is going to start the process of checking all the documents, making sure everything is in place to get that clear to close. So once we get a clear to close from the lender, then they're going to stop asking you questions. But during the process, they may ask for more documents, they may ask for questions, they may ask you to explain things. So all that's normal. Title work's going to start being done. If you want to get a survey, that'll be done. We're prepping for closing. Inspections and an appraisal is going to get ordered. So whatever inspections you want for the home, we're going to get started on that right away, get them scheduled. You can attend. I will be there. We're going to let the inspectors go through everything. They'll give you a nice summary, a nice report of their findings. And then also the bank is going to order an appraisal. These are two different things. So the home inspection is for your information and to decide if this property is something that you really love. And the appraisal is something from the bank. They're going to check value. And like I said before, on certain loans, they're going to check and make sure that you on certain loans, they're going to check and make sure there's certain safety things available and that things don't need a lot of work. So that appraisal is going to be done. So the home inspection and reports and things like that don't get sent to the lender. They do their own sort of little inspection and value evaluation. But it's important to know that an appraiser is not going to dig in and inspect the home like a home inspector would. So we do always encourage a home inspection and, termite inspection, radon gas, and, we'll go through all those things. But, just so you know, they are two separate things, okay? So the other thing is, during this whole process, the lender is going to be asking you for documents. You want to make sure you get everything into the lender as soon as possible, quick. You don't want to hesitate or take too long because that can delay things. So you just want to keep things moving along. When they ask for something, return it in as soon as you can. Okay? So a couple questions that come up. We'll talk about appraisals first. What if the value doesn't come in correctly? Or what if the appraisal says that certain things need to be repaired, like they found some chipping paint, it needs to be fixed? So most of the time, the seller should be responsible for that. And when that comes back, say the value's off, then we need to have a conversation and renegotiate terms perhaps on this. And maybe the seller lowers the price. Maybe there's a gap and the buyer comes up with the difference in the gap. So all those things. Now, most of the time, if the home doesn't appraise and the seller's not willing to lower the price and the buyer says, forget it, I can't do it, then you can get out and get that deposit back that we talked about in the beginning, okay? Home inspection, same thing. Repairs might come back. We're going to submit and ask for certain repairs to be fixed. The seller has an opportunity to fix them. If the seller agrees to fix these repairs, then great, everything moves on. If the seller does not agree to fix the repairs, then the buyer can decide that either they want the house or they don't, okay? And maybe there's some other negotiations that can take place in there. But one thing that I want to point out to buyers is that if there is a home inspection and you don't like certain things that are found, like, I don't know, say there's a broken window and the seller's, no problem, we'll fix that broken window. But you're like, I still don't want it even if it's fixed. The buyer really is still obligated to the contract if the seller agrees to fix items. So this is something that's very important. A lot of buyers think that, oh, I don't like the home inspection, I'm just going to get out of the contract. Well, that might not be the case. You might not be able to. You might lose that deposit we talked about. But also the big thing in these contracts is trying to keep everybody on the same page is that the buyer or the seller, if they don't perform correctly, are at risk of a lawsuit. So that's something we want to avoid. And then we want to make sure that everybody's happy and it's a win-win for both sides. So just be mindful that if there is something that may come out of the report, like say the house has radon gas, Well, that's fixable and you put a mitigation system in, but you don't want that. You don't want to deal with it. That could be tough to get out of unless we put in the contract that if there is a positive rate on gas, that you want the opportunity to get out of the contract, get your deposit back. So those are things to think about. If there's anything that's really important, whether it's a deal breaker on the home or not, you want to put that up front in the contract because a home inspection doesn't always get someone out of the contract if the seller is willing to fix things. So keep that in mind. And then also we talk about as is. So we see this a lot on homes. Oh, the seller is selling as is, which that means that they don't want to do repairs. They don't want to even know about repairs. They don't want anything submitted about repairs. You can get your inspections most of the time, but you're just getting an inspection to know what might be wrong with the home. So what happens with as is sometimes that can be an issue if there are repairs required from the appraisal. So your home inspection was done and you're aware of the problems, you're okay with them, and you're moving on, you want the house, but now the appraisal comes back and they're saying, hey, the whole house needs to be painted because there's chipping paint everywhere. And if the seller is not willing to do that, then the bank is not going to move forward with their loan. So it's important on these types of properties to know that that is a possibility. That's where our expertise comes in from being a real estate agent and a buyer agent and helping to make sure up front if that could be a problem, that we're going to write in that if the seller's not willing to do appraisal repairs, is if that's a problem, then we're going to write in that the seller needs to be willing to do at least appraisal required repairs, right? And if not, then that's another conversation we have to talk about. It's things, your risk starts to elevate of not being able to get that deposit back and all those things. And as I talk about all this stuff, a lot of it is the risk. Where's the risk laying and how comfortable is somebody with that risk of buying the home? So a little bit about as is and what that might mean. And after we get through all that, guess what? It's closing day. And closing day is, all the conditions of the contract have been met. Everything's done. You've got your clear to close from the lender. You're going to do a final walkthrough of the home and make sure nothing has changed from the last time you visited it. And then you're going to go to the closing attorney. You're going to sign a lot of documents and you're going to get the keys. And guess what? You're going to get the keys. And guess what? That property is yours from then on. So having the right team in place is going to help you have the smoothest transaction and hopefully be less stressful on you. That's the goal, right? There's a lot of things that agents, lenders, the attorneys, we all do behind the scenes. For me, I'm going to make sure you're getting an update on where we are in the process, and I'm making sure that everybody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing to make sure we get to closing. Okay, so all those things are happening behind the scenes. And that's kind of it. So that goes through the process of buying a home. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that in-between time, the time from writing the contract to closing. A lot of things are going on, and you have to get ready and to move too. So all those things are happening, and happy to be here to help you. When I mentioned some of the commercial property, like I said, there could be more of what's called a due diligence period, which is that period where you're doing inspections and checking out the property and making sure that everything is in place. If you're buying an investment property or a second home, maybe you're looking at income potential and how much income can be made. There's a lot of things that you may want to look at through your due diligence period, depending on what type of property you're buying. So anyway, when you're ready to get started, give me a call. Renee Edge, Keller Williams Realty, Associate Broker here, and my cell is 302-535-5599. Our office number is 302-360-0300, but it's always best to call my cell directly at 302-535-5599. Thanks for watching. Let's find your next property. So some of the other questions that come up is about getting a loan. So one of the other questions that come up is, come here. So one of the other questions that come up is about getting a loan. And you gotta go potty.